Before we get into this video, it contains heavy spoilers for Tears of the Kingdom. If you haven't gotten all the memories and don't want to be spoiled, go collect those and come back. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. The Zelda timeline, a convoluted mess that barely makes any sense. We have a timeline split that occurs because someone didn't finish playing Ocarina of Time. We have origins for key series items that differ from game to game. And to top it all off, Tears of the Kingdom comes in and says, yeah, what if Zonai founded Hyrule at the same time Ganondorf invaded? Which is a problem if Minish Cap happens before Ocarina of Time, aka when Ganondorf invaded, but also after Hyrule is founded. Well, the timeline has never been set in stone and changes with each new release, so let's break down some inconsistencies with the existing timeline and try to string together a new better one with, at the very least, less inconsistency. After a long process of watching all the cutscenes from Four Swords Trilogy, A Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, Skyward Sword, and Tears of the Kingdom, I have developed a timeline that at least makes sense, but before I show you what I think the timeline should look like, let me establish a couple of assumptions for this theory to work and provide evidence for these assumptions. The first is that Skyward Sword creates a timeline split. At the end of the game, Link wishes with the Triforce for the complete annihilation of Demise, which works. Demise is defeated and the day is saved. However, Girahim, Demise's loyal servant, kidnaps the newly awakened Zelda and takes her back in time to just after Demise was sealed away by Hylia. Link chases after them but cannot stop Girahim from breaking the seal, completely restoring Demise to his true form. Link then challenges Demise to a battle and defeats him, sealing his soul in the Master Sword to be completely destroyed. Link then goes back through the Gate of Time with Zelda and the Master Sword, leaving behind a world where Demise was defeated right after the Hylians were sent into the sky. In this timeline, Zelda would awaken as the reincarnation of Hylia in a world without Demise and would most likely return to the surface along with some of the other Hylians, similar to the timeline where Demise was destroyed with the Triforce. However, the key difference would be that the Master Sword was never forged and the Triforce and Goddess Blade would remain in Skyloft. Then the second assumption is that the Picori and the Zonai are the same race. This is supported by them both originating from the sky, having similar architecture and iconography, having similar physical features like a snout and long ears, and the ability to create sacred and godlike artifacts, like the Secret Stones, the Light Force, Mage's Cap, and the Picori Blade. The only thing against this would be their size, but we already know the Zonai went into hiding after Rauru founded Hyrule. Perhaps the rest of the Zonai, using their advanced magic, became the Picori. Creatures so small they can hide in plain sight, and so sacred only pure beings like children can see them. Which, by the way, is a lot like the Eternal Dragons, who were Zonai that swallowed secret stones and transformed. Other than these assumptions, I would also like to cover a few gripes I have with the current timeline we had before Tears of the Kingdom. My first gripe is with the Fallen Hero timeline. If there was a timeline split every time Link died, then we'd have an infinite number of branches spanning off every game. While this works theoretically, it is incredibly tedious to keep track of. It also makes the entire Downfall timeline almost feel non-canonical, because anyone who did beat Ocarina of Time would much rather follow a story that continues their adventure, not a what if I failed though scenario. So one of my goals with this timeline will be to make the Downfall timeline fit into the overarching story without a need for a timeline split with a what if scenario. Another gripe I have with the current timeline is Four Swords Adventures, the black sheep of the timeline that was just placed at the end of the child timeline for a lack of location to place it. This causes a problem since in the story being told, it is heavily implied that it takes place with the same Link from Four Swords, or at the very least not long after Four Swords. However, the current timeline has these games centuries apart. The final thing I want to point out, which can be interpreted as the history of an artifact being lost to time, is that in A Link to the Past, they say the Master Sword was forged to defend against Ganon. However, in Skyward Sword, we see that the Master Sword was forged out of the Goddess Sword by Link, the first hero in Hylia who created the Goddess Sword, way before Ganon was an issue. While I don't think this small retcon is a huge deal, it works as evidence for my new timeline, so I'll be treating it as a conflicting origin for the Blade of Evil's Bane. With that out of the way, here's the timeline I have developed. Alright, before you grab your pitchforks and head to the comments, let me explain myself. Let's go down the least controversial timeline first. The people on the surface live in peace, revering the goddess Hylia and the 3 golden goddesses who created the Triforce. One day a fissure opened on the surface and the great demon king Demise invaded with his armies to take the Triforce for his own. The goddess Hylia, unable to defeat Demise, set a plan into motion. She forged a sacred blade that would require further tempering called the Goddess Sword and implanted the spirit of Phi into it. This was a weaker but higher potential copy of Demise's blade, Girahim. She then sent the blade, the Triforce, and the remaining Hylian surface dwellers into the sky. Using the last of her power, she sealed away Demise in the sacred grounds and set her spirit to be reincarnated into a body of a Hylian in the future. Based on how much Impa aged between the 2 time periods, it is not a stretch to say this gap of time was roughly 100 years. Enough time that the secret of the surface would only be passed down by a select few in Skyloft. Skyward Sword's events happen, and Link and Zelda's descendants establish the Kingdom of Hyrule. The Hyrulean Civil War occurs, and the interlopers are banished to the Twilight Realm. Ganondorf, the King of the Gerudo, looking to take advantage of the war's toll on the kingdom, plots to invade Hyrule. He learns of the Triforce that could give him the power to not only invade Hyrule, but shape the world to his will. He goes to the Zora, Gorons, and Great Deku Tree to take their spiritual stones, the keys to the Sacred Realm, and fails. The events of Ocarina of Time play out. Ganondorf is sealed and the Hero of Time is returned to his childhood to live out the 7 years he missed out on. In the future, where Ganondorf is sealed and the hero is no longer present, many years of peace pass. However, the seal on Ganondorf weakens and eventually breaks. And with the hero no longer in this time, Ganondorf sweeps over Hyrule, plunging it back into chaos. With all hope lost, the remaining Hylians make their plea to the gods, who in turn flood Hyrule, leaving only the tops of the tallest mountains inhabitable. Ganondorf, stuck in Hyrule under a vast ocean, searches for a way to undo the god's curse. He concludes that he must acquire the Triforce to bring Hyrule into the light again. He then kills the sages that maintain the Master Sword and starts his search for Zelda. The events of the Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks all play out. Going back to the time the Hero of Time was sent back to his own time, he warns the King and Zelda of Ganondorf's plot with the Triforce of Courage as his proof. The Hero of Time then sets out on a journey to find Navi. The events of Majora's Mask play out while Hyrule goes to war with the Gerudo. Then after a long and bloody war with Ganondorf and the Gerudo, Hyrule is victorious and Ganondorf is set to be executed and the Gerudo are eradicated and tortured in Arbiter's grounds. However, since Link has the Triforce of Courage, the remaining pieces go to the people that best embody them. The Triforce of Wisdom goes to Zelda, and in a divine prank, the Triforce of Power goes to Ganondorf. Unable to kill Ganondorf, the sages instead seal him in the Twilight Realm, as they did to the interlopers from the recent war. When the Hero of Time returns, he learns of the Sage of Water's death, and feels responsible as it was because of his possession of the Triforce of Courage that Ganondorf had the Triforce of Power. Unable to forgive himself, he vows to join the Hyrulean Knights and protect the kingdom. After many generations, Ganondorf finds the interlopers in the Twilight Realm, and the events of Twilight Princess play out. Now, I feel as though most people will have no problems with the events I have laid out. Some may say that the Four Swords trilogy should be here somewhere, but I need it for the other timeline. Speaking of which, let's go down it, because you may be curious how I have the Four Swords trilogy and Tears of the Kingdom in the same timeline, with Ganondorf being around at the same time as the first King of Hyrule, and Four Swords Adventures taking place after Minish Cap, which takes place long after the Kingdom of Hyrule was established. Well, like the other timeline, let's go down it chronologically. First, we have Skyward Sword, where Link defeats Demise and returns to his time. With Demise defeated, Zelda will eventually awaken as the reincarnation of Hylia. However, Demise is no longer a threat in this timeline. She, along with some of the other Skyloftians, descend onto the surface and become known as the Hylians. Some villages form, but a kingdom is not established. The descendants of the Skyloftians, who stayed above the cloud layer, eventually find the Triforce and the Goddess Sword. Raru's ancestor, the leader of the new Skyloftians, or Zonai, uses the Triforce to gain the light powers of a god. This is called the Light Force. Using these powers and the deep technological understanding of the Zonai, they develop the Secret Stones. The Zonai then descend onto Hyrule. Their descendant, Rauru, meets the descendant of the goddess Hylia. They fall in love and wed. Together, they establish the Kingdom of Hyrule. However, the remaining Zonai, who believe they should mostly stay out of surface affairs, went into hiding, becoming the Picori. Rauru and Sonia then discover the depths, a beautiful lush land they name the Golden Lands. Rauru hides the Triforce within these lands and starts to mine Zonite, which is abundant in the Golden Lands. The Kingdom of Hyrule prospers and starts to become the ruling faction of Hyrule. Sonia and Rauru then have a child who inherits both Hylia's power of time and Rauru's light force. A few years later, Zelda from Tears of the Kingdom is found by Sonia and Rauru. They take her in to search for a way to send her back to her time. Ganondorf, King of the Gerudo, refuses to form an alliance with the prosperous but new Kingdom of Hyrule. He launches an attack on the kingdom but is utterly defeated in the first battle due to the power of the Secret Stones. He then begins a plot to steal a Secret Stone in order to defeat the Kingdom of Hyrule. He starts by pledging loyalty to the Kingdom of Hyrule in order to prevent further conflict, allowing him to put his plot into motion. Using the sorcery of the Gerudo, he creates a fake Zelda to get Sonia alone, at which point he murders Sonia and takes her Secret Stone. As a reincarnation of Demise's hatred, the stone transforms Ganondorf into a Demon King. With the newfound power, he completely defeats Hyrule, cornering the last of them in the Forgotten Temple, where the sages this time receive a Secret Stone and vow to defeat Ganondorf. Ganondorf then learns of the Golden Land, where a legendary artifact called the Triforce is hidden. He travels there in search of it. However, the sages confront Ganondorf in the Golden Land, but unable to defeat the Demon King, Rauru sacrifices himself to seal Ganondorf away. The Master Sword then suddenly appears in front of Zelda as she is wondering what to do. She then concludes it is her duty to reforge the sword with sacred energy until the time of Tears of the Kingdom. Minoru seals herself in the Purapad to aid the future Link, and Zelda swallows the Secret Stone to become an eternal dragon and heal the Master Sword. However, peace did not last long, as while Ganondorf corrupted the Golden Land with his malice, the first calamity is born. A large boar-like monster named Ganon invades Hyrule from the Golden Land. Unable to battle the calamity, the people of Hyrule plead to the remaining Zonai, now referred to as the Picori, for help. The Picori gift them the Picori Blade, the first sacred blade of this timeline. An unnamed hero defeats the calamity, and on the king's order, 7 wise men seal all gates to the Golden Land, now named the Dark World. After an undefined large amount of time passes, a Picori named Vati learns of the evil in the hearts of men, and of the light force that rightfully belonged to his people, which is now in the possession of the Hyrulean royal family. He steals his master's sacred creation, the Mage's Cap, and enters the swordsmanship tournament during the Picori Festival. The events of the Minish Cap play out. After sealing Vati in the Four Sword, the Link of that time establishes the Knights of Hyrule, an elite group of warriors tasked with protecting the elements used to forge the Four Sword and open the gate to the sky where the Picori live. After a few generations, the seal on Vati begins to weaken, and the second calamity is formed. The second calamity, after utter defeat from the Picori Blade, adapts and begins a plot to gain even greater power. The second calamity, instead of taking on its own form, begins to corrupt the current Ganondorf from birth, filling his heart with darkness. After Ganondorf becomes an adult, Zelda and her childhood friend Link go to inspect the seal of Vati, where they discover the seal has been broken, and Vati, after losing his sense of self, begins to kidnap beautiful maidens to wed. Link then draws the Four Sword, and the events of Four Swords occurs. After Vati is resealed, Ganondorf realizes he could use Vati as a red herring to help him destroy Hyrule. Ganondorf then goes to the Pyramid in the Desert of Doubt, where he finds the Trident, a powerful artifact that gives Ganondorf great power. This turns him into Ganon, the second calamity. He goes to the Temple of Darkness to retrieve the Dark Mirror, which can reveal the evil that lies within a person. He uses this to create an evil version of the hero who sealed Vati, called Shadow Link. A Shadow Link then tricks Link into repulling the Four Sword and setting Vati free, who Ganon then confronts and forces to do his bidding. The events of Four Swords' adventures ensue. With the second calamity sealed in the Four Sword, Vati defeated for good, the Knights of Hyrule diminished to only Link, and the Dark World completely sealed off. The imprisoning war, which takes place from Ganondorf's attack on Hyrule to the imprisonment of the second calamity in the Four Sword, is over. With 2 instances of Ganondorf being corrupted by hatred and malice, the Gerudo set a law that men can no longer enter their villages. This has the byproduct of Gerudo men no longer being considered Gerudo, but instead Hylians. Also, the royal family realizes they can never pull the Four Sword again, and understand they will need another sacred blade. At which point, they turn to the Goddess Sword, which is a sacred blade, but is not strong enough to protect Hyrule. With the knowledge of the Master Sword from the Zelda that turned into a dragon, The sages of this time bathed the goddess sword in sacred energy to forge the Master Sword, which is then sealed away in the Lost Woods with a seal that can only be broken by 3 pendants scattered across the land, and then as an extra security measure, ensure only a descendant of the Knights of Hyrule can pull the sword. A large amount of time passes, long enough for these events to become legend. However, the third calamity shows its face. It creates a puppet called Aghanim to become Hyrule's court wizard. After infiltrating the castle, Aghanim puts his plan into motion. He kills the king, imprisons the princess, and brainwashes the soldiers. Zelda then reaches out to a boy named Link and his uncle, who are the last descendants of the Knights of Hyrule. The events of A Link to the Past takes place. With the third calamity defeated, the hero of legend uses the Triforce to wish for the resurrection of all who died in the conflict, and takes to the seas to chase the thrill of adventure. The events of Link's awakening takes place. Then, after returning to Hyrule, the hero of legend hears the Triforce calling out to him. The events of the Oracle games ensued, which includes a premature fourth calamity, creating a mindless beast version of Ganon. Afterward, the hero of legend settles in Kakariko Village to live out the rest of his days. About 100 years later, a parallel world called Lorule destroys their Triforce. This causes their world to start falling apart. Lorule then invades Hyrule to steal Hyrule's Triforce to restore their lands. The events of A Link Between Worlds ensues. After saving Hyrule and Lorule, this new Link takes a trip to a land called Hytopia, where the events of Triforce Heroes takes place. After 4 calamities, the Kingdom of Hyrule understood Ganon's cyclic nature. They also now possessed the Triforce. They created a plan that would last for generations. Whenever the calamity would occur, the King of Hyrule would use the Triforce to instantly seal it away. This was considered the golden era of Hyrule. During this time, the land prospered and expanded. The Sheikah even developed amazing technology to help protect Hyrule. However, when a king referred to as the Great King was nearing the end of his life, he saw evil in his son and good in his daughter Zelda. Because of this, he hid the Triforce of Courage and cast a spell on Hyrule that ensured the crest of the Triforce would appear upon a worthy person who had been properly raised, reached a certain age, and gained enough experience. He then passed the Triforce of Wisdom and Power to Zelda in secret. After he passed, his son became king, and through the corruption of an evil wizard thought to be the disciple of Ganon, much like Aghanim, the new king and wizard interrogated Princess Zelda on the location of the Triforce. Zelda refused to give up any information, and after the wizard lost his temper, he gave up his life force to put Zelda to sleep for eternity. Filled with grief for what he had done to his sister, the young king placed his sister on an altar in the North Castle, in hopes that one day she would be revived. He then issued a decree that every princess born in the royal family would be named Zelda in honor of his sister. He then led the kingdom the best he could. However, without the full Triforce over many generations, the Kingdom of Hyrule fractured and shrunk to a fraction of what it was. This Hyrule was called Lesser Hyrule. Then, when it was time for the next calamity, Ganon swept through with ease. Ganon successfully stole the Triforce of Power. Then Zelda, fearing the same for the Triforce of Wisdom, split it into 8 shards and scattered them across the Dark World. She also sent her nursemaid Impa to find someone courageous enough to defeat Ganon. When Ganon learned of this plot, he captured the princess and sent his minions after Impa. When his minions cornered Impa, a boy named Link appeared and fended off the minions with nothing but his wits. Impa then explained her circumstances to Link, who made the decision to defeat Ganon and rescue Zelda. The events of Legend of Zelda ensue. After defeating Ganon, Link stayed in Hyrule to help with the reconstruction efforts. However, it was all for naught, as Hyrule was once again laid to waste by Ganon's minions in a plot to resurrect him. After 6 years of this constant back and forth between Hyrule and Ganon's minions, the crest of the Triforce appeared on the back of Link's hand, who is now 16. Concerned, he showed this to Impa, who, knowing what this meant, took him to the North Castle, where Zelda I lay sleeping. Impa recounted the history of Zelda I and the Great King of Hyrule to Link. She then gave him a scroll and 6 crystals. The scroll told Link the location of the Triforce of Courage and how to use the crystals as keys deep in 6 palaces of Hyrule to get the Triforce of Courage. The events of The Adventure of Link ensue. After collecting the full Triforce and waking Zelda I, he used it to stop Ganon's minions from resurrecting Ganon. The kingdom, with the full Triforce once again, began to expand. The Triforce, instead of being passed down through the king, was now passed down through the princesses of Hyrule. After many generations, a new alliance was formed with the Sheikah and other tribes of Hyrule. Another calamity ensued. However, Hyrule was more than ready. The Sheikah, with their giant mechanical divine beasts piloted by champions, the hero with the Sword of Evil's Bane, and Zelda, the Princess of Hyrule, with the full power of the Triforce, easily defeated the calamity. However, in pure awe of the awesome power of the divine beast and fear that the kingdom could be overthrown, the King of Hyrule ordered that they be decommissioned and buried, and only dug back up in the event of another calamity. A section of the Sheikah who believed this was a mistake fractured from the royal family and created the Yiga. 10,000 years pass. In that time, the Yiga's hatred for the royal family twisted into a reverence for the calamity. The Triforce went from being a physical artifact to one that needed to be awakened in the princess, and Hyrule prospered into a peaceful kingdom. However, the signs of calamity were starting to show, an increase in Ganon's minions, and a boy who pulled the Master Sword. The kingdom began to excavate ancient Sheikah technology and get Zelda to awaken her sealing power, aka the Triforce, to prepare for the calamity. When the calamity struck, it had learned from its last attempt, like it had so often done, and took over all of the Sheikah technology that was excavated. The calamity completely destroyed Hyrule and defeated Link. Zelda, who had not fully awakened the Triforce, used the power of light she inherited through her direct bloodline connection to Rauru to seal the calamity Ganon away for 100 years. In that time, Link sat in the Resurrection Chamber healing from the wounds he had suffered. The events of Breath of the Wild take place. After defeating Dark Beast Ganon with the fully awakened Triforce, Link and Zelda begin to rebuild Hyrule. However, roughly 3 to 6 years later, Link and Zelda are exploring under Hyrule Castle to find the source of the strange substance called gloom. They unknowingly enter the Dark World and find Ganondorf still sealed by Rauru, but the seal breaks and the events of Tears of the Kingdom take place. Alright, now you can take your pitchforks and read the comments section. But seriously, if you're still here, thank you for watching. If you liked the video and want to see more like it, drop a like, and if you loved it, hit that subscribe button. Also, let me know what you think about any of the other theories I proposed in this video. And with that, I'm going to get back to playing Tears of the Kingdom. Peace.